Okay, so we've got the iFIRExMAN project, which Farhan will talk to us about directly, and its 3 components and what we'll be doing in Singapore. I'll continue on after that with the finishing off yesterday's presentations, and then we'll get into the Eduroam component of the training, starting with the update from India on what they're doing with Eduroam, and then getting started with Eduroam, a beginner's guide I'll present. And if I have any questions or issues that I can't deal with, I've got plenty of support in the room from Hideaki GOTO, who's the guru of Eduroam, and also Farhan from Malaysia, who's also all over this stuff. So there's plenty of knowledge in the room about Eduroam, way more than I have. I'm going to now hand over to Farhan and stop sharing, and his team to take on the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Terry.
One video.
All right, so good morning, everyone. Welcome to the iFIRExMAN training. So for this morning session, I would like to do a presentation on how to implement identity federation. So on Monday and also yesterday, Terry has presented about what is identity federation and why you or an organization should embark in identity federation, the benefit and challenges and so on. So my presentation today will be more focused on the technical aspect on the implementation of identity federation. So okay, now you are about to begin your journey to implement identity federation at your community. Okay, so I assume that you are working with the R&E community, research and education community. So in general, there are 2 aspects that you will need to prepare. So the non-technical aspect, which is you need to prepare a set of policies, such as federation policy, metadata registration, practice statement, SAML, web SSO technology profile, data protection profile, and some other policy that you may have. Okay, but for edugan joining a requirement, at least you need to have these 4 policy in your federation. So and then the technical aspect is you would need to deploy federation core services, which is the federation manager or metadata aggregator, where you will collect all the metadata from the IDP or SP. In some cases, you may also collect from attribute provider AP, but in reality, it's a bit rare, the implementation. I don't see many federation implement attribute provider, but what I know, Gakunin has, and some other this what called project. There's a one edu teams in Europe. Okay. And also you need to deploy a discovery service in your federation. I will explain in more detail about it, what is the function or role of this component at the upcoming slides, and also metadata query or metadata repository. And also it's good to have a website that explain about your federation, and also information hub or like a wiki where you provide information how the participant could set up their IDP and connect to your federation. In fact, website or this information hub is sometime during the edugan vetting process. The reviewer would look into this as well. Okay. So for the policies, Jinan project has created a federation policy template to help new and emerging federation to quickly understand the requirement for federation policy and to support interoperable approach to policy creation and implementation. So it is important to have a common understanding in federation policy so that interoperability between one federation and another federation could happen. Okay, without this mutual understanding, then probably Edugen would never exist. Okay, and it's not easy actually if you would uh, uh, write or prepare this federation policy from the scratch. Okay, so because I believe that most of us has no background uh, in law or legal or something like that. Okay, so federation, especially the new federation, are encouraged to use this template. Okay, in fact, when you applying for EduGame membership, so the first question will be asked is, are you following the template or not? Okay, so if you are following the template, usually the vetting process become much faster. Okay, because generally the reviewer already know what is the general structure of a policy. But if you draft the policy on your own, then unless there's something outstanding or different, I mean, something that force you to make uh, to write a policy from the scratch. Otherwise, you may be your application may be turned down by the educate. Okay, so it's highly encouraged to just use this federation policy. Okay, because this policy has been read through by many federation operators, I believe by some legal and so on. So the policy you can download from Refed's website. So if you forgot the URL, probably you can just go to Google, type Refed's federation template, then you should be able to find the link. In fact, one of the author of this template is with us today, Brook. Okay, so and
Yeah,
then
just to interject, Farhan,
Yep.
the policy template wasn't designed in isolation. We actually looked at all of the policies of the active federations at the point in time, and we distilled the best bits of all of it. And so, the only improvement beyond the template that I've ever seen is SIFULAN in South Africa, who put an interesting, data protection clause in, but their policy was developed later. But generally, the policy template stands pretty well on its own, and also can be used as the policy. It's modular, so it's actually not SAML specific. It can actually be used as the policy for your Eduroam deployment if you don't already have, a policy surrounding that.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, modular, because let me go back. Because for example, Edugen required this. So this is sort of like your federal policy become the core policy, and you can have another policy that discuss something in more detail. Okay. So and then majority of the identity federation are using this template, hence no need to shy to adopt them. Okay, all right. So but of course you don't take it blindly. You may need to really read and understand what is in written in that policy, and feel free for you to adopt it with your local regulation. For example, like if there is some dispute, then you can say that okay, then the Malaysian law or Cambodian law will be followed, or court of justice will be followed, something like that. Okay, so you need to edit it in such that fit with your community. Okay. And so that is for the non-technical. So for the, I think one way that you can do before you come for the face-to-face session in Singapore, so you can have a look this federation policy. Maybe you can start changing some of the I would say some of the variable that you can change in the federation policy, and you can bring that to Singapore. So maybe me, Terry, or Brook can help you to look at your federation policy draft and advise you which part that you may need to amend, so that when you're applying for EduGame membership, it become much faster for the vetting process. Okay, so then about the federation core service. So it's a must-have services for an for an identity federation operator. So I just put in short FedOp. Okay, so what are the service that a federation identity? What are the service that a FedOp need to have? So number one is Federation Manager.
I found this on.
Oh, sorry. Suddenly trigger Siri. Okay. So to help the FedOp register IDP and SP metadata and aggregate them into a single metadata file. Okay. So how the federation works is actually the federation operator would either the IDP or SP provide the deposit the metadata to you, or you collect from them through a dedicated URL. Okay, and then you aggregate them into a single metadata file, and you digitally sign that aggregate metadata file. So after that, you redistribute back this metadata to the federation members. Okay, so federation member would trust this metadata because you have vet through the entity of the IDP and SP, and also you digitally sign this single metadata file. And for the IDP and SP, they must, although it's not a must, but highly recommend to verify the metadata, okay, by verifying whether this metadata was signed by a federation operator or not. Okay, so there are several options for the federation manager, but I think the most popular one is Jaeger. It's a web-based application based on PHP where you can use to register IDP and SP into your federation. Okay, and the next service that you would need to have is a discovery service. Is to help particularly the SP implement where are you from or way of operation. Like for example, when your user accessing a service, okay, and would like to log in using identity federation. So at that time, the SP doesn't know where the user coming from. So then the SP asks the user to select which home organization that would able to verify your identity. Okay, so usually this discovery service can be implemented by SP itself, but it's also possible that SP make use of this central service provided by an identity federation operator. So next service for the discovery service, there are several options, but I think among the most popular one is SwitchYF. It's an option to implement discovery service, even though there's some other alternative as well, like I think if or seamless access also can be used for discovery service. And then metadata query. Okay, so this is not that many federation operator provide a metadata query or MDQ service to the federation member, but there's good benefit actually having a metadata query. So basically, metadata query is an on-demand, a metadata on-demand service where both IDP and SP can pull an entity's metadata from the federation operator on demand. Okay, so it means that they don't have to download the entire set of metadata files into their IDP or SP middleware or software. So they just can pull which metadata that they need. Okay, so the issue is like if your IDP or SP would like to download the entire Eduroam metadata, the file could be big, I think, and it will be growing, not shrinking. So I think for now, how many? I think 70 MB, maybe more. Maybe more. Okay. So and then you and all this metadata need to be loaded into the memory. Okay, so means that for the IDP or SP, they need to prepare a bigger memory to be able to load all this metadata into the computer memory space. Okay, so and probably you won't need all this metadata to be in your system. Okay, because there are sometimes in the Eduroam there are some organization, they also deposited their internal system metadata into Eduroam, which is not relevant to you. Okay, so by providing this metadata query, you can help the IDP and SP to minimize the or reduce the computing resources requirement. Okay, so and for this metadata query, PIF is one great option for implementing metadata query service. Okay, so these are some snapshots from the some tools that for the Federation Core service. So this is a snapshot of Jaeger, which is a Federation manager where you can register, you can create several federation. Okay, so typically a federation operator have two types of federation. One is the main one, the production one, and another one is test federation or development federation. Okay, so and then you can also register IDP and service provider as well. Okay, so it has a quite nice interface where you can just fill in some form information from in the form field to fit in. Then later on, the Jaeger will aggregate all this metadata into one single metadata file. Okay, and then this is on your left screen is an example of a discovery service based on switch or YF. Okay, so here you can see that there's a list of IDP or home organization that can verify user identity, and on your right side is web-based of metadata query. Actually, the SP or IDP won't see this page actually on the right side. They make the query through HTTP post actually at the back end, not really at the front end. Front end typically, if I, for example, if I want to see the metadata of certain IDP or SP, then I can use this web interface as well. So after you completed setting up the Federation core service, and the actual challenge begin. Okay, so which is to get IDP and SP on board. Okay, So frankly speaking, based on our experience, getting IDP and SP on board is the actual challenge of running identity federation. Setting up the core service is easy. Okay, it's not that difficult, but to get IDP and SP on board is quite challengeful, because some organization may have different setup. Okay, there are some that are quite decent for their directory services or IDMS system, and some is totally don't have any IDMS or a proper directory service. Same goes to SP, because not many demand. Maybe there are some SP that doesn't support SIFULAN login yet, but there are some SP that already supported, but require you to be a member of Eduroam and so on. Okay, so if your identity federation is a part of interfederation like Eduroam, getting SP on board is not that difficult, as you can rely on this interfederation to supply the metadata. Okay, in fact, in our federation, probably we don't have many SP registered directly actually to our federation, probably around 20. Okay, most of the SP that our IDP member can access is come from Eduroam. Okay, so you don't have to ring every single SP bell to join your federation. Actually, in fact, they probably prefer to be connected through the Eduroam. Okay, and majority of the SP has already support SAML authentication, so it's not that worrying about getting an SP to get on. However, getting the IDP on board can be a challenging task, as I said, each organization may have a different level of IT expertise or capability to set up IDP software. So then how to help an organization to set up the IDP? Okay, so beside you just provide a tutorial and and hoping that they're able to set up on their own. Okay, so if you come from a developed country, probably yes, you can do that. But if you are from a developing country, probably it's not really a good idea. Okay, so you need to handhold them to set up the IDP software. Okay, so based on our experience, there are two ways how you can help them. Number one, you can provide an on-prem rapid deployment tools. I think AAF has created an on-prem rapid deployment tools, which was presented during the iFIRE project. In fact, we adopted this service, these tools, and of course we changed a few things to suit our federation. Okay, Terry, is your on-prem rapid deployment tools still in service?
Yeah, we still have those tools. They're the current version of Shibboleth at the moment, and we'll keep maintaining that in parallel with rapid IDP solution, our cloud solution.
Okay, so it's available on your GitHub, right?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, you can use that service one, or you can also provide IDP as a service, like what SIFULAN and also AAF provide. Okay. So for this training or presentation, I will be more focused on the second option, which is IDP as a service. As for we believe that probably this is the better way how you can get organization to be on board as an IDP probably quicker than the on-prem. Okay, so the objective of IDP as a service is to offload the complexity of running IDP software from organization to FedOp. Okay, because of the organization will come to you. Okay, so they assume that of course you are the expert because you are providing the service. Okay, so and you can provide on-prem, but the problem with the on-prem is when there is a problem, you need to help them to troubleshoot, you have to do like a remote login, or even you need to do site visit and so on. Okay, in fact, it's even in SIFULAN experience, sometimes it can be troublesome as well. Some organization allow us only using any dash, or only even using VPN. We need to fill out some form and so on and so forth. It's quite troublesome sometimes. Okay, and then there's a lot of permutation, means that there are some organizations that using multiple firewall, and sometimes in the process of troubleshooting become quite challenging and so on. Okay. So by providing IDP as a service means that you have a full control of the IDP, and it gives you flexibility to provide the best service to your customer, or to your community or member. Okay, so and then it can also works as an extension, basically extending the scope of the current IDMS. Okay, such as ADFS. If you are using on-prem AD, so actually it has a federated authentication as well, called ADFS, Active Directory Federation Service. But if you use it internally for your use, your organization use, is generally is fine. But if you would like to use it for federation use, like EduGain and so on, it quite troublesome. Okay, so probably putting a proxy IDP in front of ADFS is a much better solution. Okay, the same goes to Azure AD, which is a cloud version of ADFS. So those who are subscribing or using Office 365, it comes together with Azure AD. So actually you can rely on the Azure AD as your IDMS or identity provider, but you put a Siebel IDP in front of this Azure as the proxy, so that you can have a better way to manage your connectivity to the EduGain later. Okay, another solution is Google Internet Directory. So for those who are using Google Workspace, but I put some caveat here on the Google Internet Directory. Well, generally it works. Okay, we have tried it, but the way Google Internet Directory manage the user attribute or data is for me is a bit disappointing. Okay, and then some other solution like a cache and so on. So and then another benefit of running IDP as a service is keeping the federation running the same standard of implementation. Means that everyone using the same software probably has generally the same setting. So is much easier, particularly for the service provider, to anticipate what is the setting look like from the IDP. Okay. So, and then of course it's accelerate the adoption of identity federation among the community, because perhaps just additional extra miles from what they already have, or if they don't have, then you can use this so that they can use it right away. Okay, and you may potentially generate income from this service if you would like to charge your community. Okay, but of course some is depend, like for example in SIFULAN, IDP as a service is come together with the federation membership. So if you're a member of SIFULAN Federation, then you can have this IDP as a service as well. Okay, so we made that decision because we believe that IDP as a service is an enabler for the organization to, when they want to embark to identity federation, so we make it easy for them to join and attractive. Okay, but if you would like to offer this service as part of your RAN membership, then this is up to you. Okay. All right, so now I would like to introduce the IDP as a service that SIFULAN developed. Okay, so we call it SIFULAN EID. EID stands for Electronic ID. It's a service. It's a service from SIFULAN. Of course, in perspective of this project, it become a product. Okay, product service. So that provide a cloud-hosted IDP solution for research and education institution. So with SIFULAN EID, R&E institution can set up the IDP's service as a service and join the federation in short period. Okay. In fact, in some of cases, if technically it can be done in less than 1 hour to set up a proxy and connect to the federation. Okay, of course, to be exposed in the EduGain, it may take up like 12 to 24 hours to be fully connected with all the entire federation. So it has two options, either fully hosted and proxy. Okay, I will explain what is fully hosted and what is proxy at the upcoming slide. So it developed based on a cloud native technology and was built entirely based on open source software stacks. So for the fully hosted, both the IDP and the user group database are hosted by the federation operator. So you host it, okay? And to manage the users and groups, we develop a dedicated portal called Vikings, okay? So that your federation member can manage the user through this portal. Okay, so this is ideal for an organization that does not have a directory service or an IDMS. Okay, in our case, usually we provide fully hosted for those who would like to do sort of like a trial. Okay, testing out the what is an identity federation look like. Okay, because most of the organization here in Malaysia, they already have some sort of directory service or an IDMS. Okay, and so I mean, we have the solution, but at the moment, not that many using this fully hosted. Okay, because most of the users of our IDP service is they're using proxy mode. Okay, so in this proxy deployment, the IDP works as a proxy or front end to the existing IDMS such as Azure, Google, and so on. Okay, so currently it supports AzureReady, IDFS, and Google Internet Directory. Although technically any SAML compatible IDMS can be supported, but at least we have validated that it works with 4 of this IDMS. Okay, so but our personal recommendation is probably AzureReady is among the best one to be integrated. Okay, compared with others. So it's ideal for an organization that already have an IDMS system. Okay, so about Viking, the portal. So Viking stands for Virtual Identity Key Inbounding and Monitoring System. Can be used for several purposes, such as managing user account for staff, student, or guests, or any other group of users. So it's a modular system made up of customizable modules and fully accessible through desktop or mobile as a web application. So it's a web-based application. So this is the interface of Viking, where you can create, add a user in your user database, which later on will be used by the shibboleth for user authentication. So you can put name, and also you can create group as well. Okay, so it has reset password, deactivation, and so on. Okay, so it's a modular. Actually, we have several versions of Vikings. Even we do have a Viking that can support for IoT, IoT device registration as well. But for this iFIRExMAN, we will provide the very basic version of Viking, okay, which is sufficient for an IDP, okay. And also there's group management features where you can create a groups and assign user to that group, which later on you can use for the person entitlement mapping, okay, for application access control. So since SIFULAN ID is based on a cloud native technology, so I would like to highlight a bit about what is cloud native. So it's a technology that basically is a software development technology that utilizes cloud computing to build and run scalable application in modern dynamic environments such as public, private, and hybrid cloud. So combined with robust automation, cloud native allow engineers to make high impact changes frequently and predictably with minimal toil or minimal disruption to the entire technology, disruption to the existing system. If we compare cloud native and cloud computing, cloud native is not something to replace or compete with cloud computing. Instead, cloud native consists of several components that typically run above the cloud computing infrastructure. And of course, the major difference between cloud native and cloud computing is typically cloud computing is VM based. Okay, let's say you would like to deploy an application, you would power up a VM and run that particular application. But in a cloud native, if you would like to run an application, the application will be deployed as a Linux container. Okay. So cloud native is pretty much focused on the software development and management, while cloud computing more focused on infrastructure development and management. Okay, so the heart or the core of the cloud native itself is Kubernetes, which is, or sometimes is written as K8S. It's an open source container orchestration system for automating software deployment, scaling, and management. Okay, so it's pretty much the core of the cloud native stack. Because all applications that run on top of Kubernetes is a containerized application. Hence, the benefit of containers is also applicable to Kubernetes, such as easy to deploy and then support multiple base system and so on. Okay, so Kubernetes has several great features such as load balance, failover, high availability, partitioning or namespaces, excuse me, key value database such as config map or secrets, and among others. So it's horizontally scaled, means that the more worker node is added to the cluster, the bigger your Kubernetes system capacity. Okay. So this is a general Kubernetes architecture. Actually, it's quite simple in terms of architecture. So it consists of two different nodes. Okay, one is called as master node, where it runs the API services and also the databases. I mean, a database that stores the current state of your cluster or configuration of your cluster. And then there's a Kubernetes node. This is where the actual application or containers are running. Okay? And it has several sub-components for each node. So, but I wouldn't discuss it today in detail. But I believe you can look into. There's a lot of video at YouTube and also article that explain how Kubernetes works in more detail. Okay, so for our hands-on session at Singapore, we will deploy SIFULAN EID for your federation, and you will deploy it using Kubernetes. So we will provide a simple guide how you can set up Kubernetes for the purpose of running SIFULAN EID. Okay. So setting up Kubernetes, there are several options, either hosted from Amazon, from EKS, Elastic Kubernetes Service, GKE, Google Kubernetes Engine, IBM, Alibaba, and so on. So there's a lot. There's a private or on-prem setup, such as KubeIDM, Red Hat, OpenShift, or SUSE, RKE1, and RKE2. Okay. My personal preference is SUSE, RKE1, or RKE2. Okay, so in SIFULAN, we are using RKE1, but we are in the process of migrating to RKE2. Okay. And for the training at Singapore, for the hands-on session at Singapore later, we will use RKE1. Okay. And for desktop, there are several Kubernetes option as well, such as from SUSE, there are K3s or Ranger Desktop, and from Canonical or Ubuntu, there's some Micro KS, Docker Desktop, and so on. So you can refer to the CNCF, which is the foundation that oversee the development of cloud native solution and technology for more detail. And minimum number of node or server for Kubernetes deployment is 1. Basically, you combine the control plane, which is the master node, and the node component compute node in one node. Okay, but however, this is usually for case like if you would like to run Kubernetes on your own computer. Okay, for production deployment, it's recommended to separate the control plane and node component into 2 separate servers. So you will have dedicated nodes and also dedicated server. And for production setup with high availability or HA, it is recommended to have 3 or odd number of dedicated nodes for or server for the control plane, and at least 3 or odd number dedicated nodes for node component. So this is the architecture of SIFULAN EID. Actually, this is already simplified for the purpose of iFIRExMAN project. Our deployment is actually more complex than this, but this is the we try to make it easier for you to deploy. So basically, you would have several namespaces or partition So the main one is called the core, where you can run all the Federation core services. Okay, if you see here, there's a Get Eduroam and also Eduroam IDP. We'll discuss more detail in the upcoming training at APAN 55 at Nepal later. But for our session at Singapore, we'll be more focused on Jagger, MDQ, and also WAF. Okay. So, and then for the institution, well, it will be depend on how's your community look like, but at least they may have one instance to run as an IDP, and optionally user manager or Vikings. Okay, so if, let's say, I think in the case of Cambodia, where the organization already has Office 365 or IAMready, so maybe the best way to get them on board is by setting up IDP as a proxy, and then link them with the Azure or Office 365. So you don't need to deploy this Viking. But for some countries that the organization doesn't have any IDMS or user databases, then you can make use of Viking. Actually, even like Azure, right? They also provide Azure AD for free. Okay, except that, of course, there are some certain limitation, but generally it works well if your organization is not that big. Okay, so that is some alternative deployment as well. Okay, so later during the hands-on session in Singapore, you will deploy SIFULAN ID based on this architecture. So what is the computing resource requirement for this to deploy SIFULAN EID in your organization? So you need to have like 6 virtual machine. So 3 VM as the master node, okay, which each has 4 CPU cores, 8 GB RAM, and 25 GB of storage. And for the compute node, 8 CPU cores, 16 GB RAM, and for the storage, 50 GB for the operating system and 100 GB for the data. And you would need 2 public IP and also several host certificate. You can use Let's Encrypt is fine as the host certificate. Okay, so we'll discuss more, advise more for this resource requirement, because some of the participants may entitle for a server, but maybe not that soon, because we still figuring out how to procure the server and distribute it to you. But nevertheless, for the upcoming workshop in Singapore, you would need to prepare this 6 VM and 2 public IP prior on the hands-on session at Singapore later. Okay. All right. Any question?
Yes, Farhan, how many IDPs we can run on single node?
Okay, so it depending what mode are you running. Is it a proxy or a hosted? So if
Proxy mode.
If proxy mode, each proxy mode requires like at least 2 CPU cores, 2 GB memory. So if you have like 16 GB of memory, probably you can host like 7 to 8 proxy per VM. Of course, if you increase the VM, then it will be more IDP that you can host in your per per Kubernetes node. So if you want to add more, you can either vertically increase the each VM, or you just add another node. Actually, I'm more keen to add another node actually instead of increasing each VM spec.
So basically, in this scenario, the node is also a VM, not a physical machine.
Yeah, it can be physical, it can be VM.
And they can fail over to one node, one IDPs can fail over to other node in case some sort of issue.
Yeah. That's why the reason why we choose cloud native as the base deployment base is because of Kubernetes has a very good built-in HA features. So for example, if let's say one Kubernetes node is down, so automatically Kubernetes will assign the instance or the pod into another available nodes. And in fact, you can run multiple pods. Let's say you would like to have load balancing for each IDP. That's also possible.
Okay, and what about the management module? It is different from the nodes.
Yeah, it's different. Well, the management node, Kubernetes management nodes, practically you never touch it. Okay, so and it's not that demanding in terms of resources. Rarely you touch the master nodes. Mostly you work only with the compute nodes.
So you are running your federation now on this setup. So what kind of technical issues you have faced now so far? Because what kind of technical expertise is required, like Linux-based requirement? So we have to train our.
Okay, number one, you need to know Kubernetes. Okay, for sure. So managing Kubernetes not necessarily from Linux. Okay, you can also, in fact, if you want to run this infrastructure in Windows, it's also possible. There is Kubernetes for Windows, but I would advise you to just use Linux because it makes your life easier. Okay, because the issue with Windows, if you want to scale your add more Kubernetes nodes, then you need to acquire a license for additional Windows node. Where in Linux you don't need to pay for license, and then and of course you need to have skill on the software as well, like operating MySQL, web server, Apache, and so on. Excuse me, I want to grab a glass of water. Give me a minute. Okay, I'm back.
Yes, Farhan, what is Eduroam doing here? What is the function of Eduroam?
Okay. The function of Eduroam here is actually you can use identity federation to obtain Eduroam credential. So that is the purpose of Eduroam here, because this project not only cover for SIFULAN IDP or identity federation, but also Eduroam. Okay, so maybe I can
But how you will connect to the Wi-Fi first? How you connect first get that network connectivity when you are
Oh,
not
okay.
connected to
So
anything.
of course there is another connection. If you see this Eduroam IDP, so the controller will connect to this Eduroam IDP/SP. Maybe I can play some demo. Okay, this is what we has been piloting in Malaysia. How the user can obtain Eduroam credential by using identity federation. Hang on. Oh yeah, this is already high definition. Okay, first the user need to access a portal. Okay, so click get started and sorry, it's quite fast. So then the user need to authenticate themselves using identity federation. So this is web service. So in this case, the demonstrator selects SIFULAN virtual home as the home organization. And then they log in to the system. Okay, and they consent. Okay, so after that, after the authentication is done, then the user can download the Eduroam credential and also Eduroam profile according to their devices. So in this example, the user is using a MacBook. So it select Apple device, download the profile, and then open the profile. And then install this profile. So it uses TLS, digital certificate, to access the Eduroam. So once installed, install the profile. Okay, done. So, and then click Eduroam. Okay, user is now connected to Eduroam. Okay, so that's how the user can use identity federation as the mean for user authentication to download Eduroam credential. So means that the organization doesn't have to set up their own IDP. Instead they just need to set up Eduroam SP at their organization, because setting up Eduroam SP is and manage it is much easier compared with the Eduroam IDP. So yeah, that's why there is an Eduroam in this architecture.
And how many public IPs will be required? Because once the more
two,
IPs,
you need two public IP.
So how, for example, there are multiple IDPs. So every IDP or every institution will have same IP.
All right.
And
yeah, so
how
they will
will
have
manage
IP.
their public DNS entries.
Okay, so the ingress will manage in Kubernetes. There is one component called ingress. So ingress will do this mapping to the will do the mapping to the each pod, service and pod. Because ingress they connect to the service connect to the pod. Okay, so ingress will manage it. So only one IP is needed for ingress. So at the DNS, they need to register the ingress public IP.
Each IDP will have the same IP, and at the end they
will have the same IP. You can have each IDP one IP, but it's just piece of IP.
You mean the ports will be different for each ID?
Okay, so if you assign IP, no, the port will be the same. It's just that there is not much benefit if you are doing that. Okay, so because Ingress, Kubernetes Ingress able to do this HTTP proxy nicely to your service and application. So yeah, so you don't need to have multiple public IP for I mean one IDP, one public IP. You don't need to have that. The concept is the same like shared hosting. Okay, in the shared hosting, you only have one IP for your entire server, right? But you can host multiple domain in that web server.
Okay, and any other services that you are offering with the same package that the universities will be interested, other than the research journal websites?
No, we don't provide journal. So we mentally only for, but we work with Myren actually. So Myren will provide the service such as file sender, EduVPN, and also video conferencing. Okay, using Big Blue Button. So all these are provided by Myren, and Myren rely on SIFULAN Federation to provide the trust framework for user authentication. Soon, Myren has a plan to provide private cloud services to the university and use Identity Federation for the authentication methods. We don't provide except we only provide this get Eduroam only for our federation members. Most of the actual services either use services that the university already subscribe or Myren provide the service.
So thank you.
Welcome.
Farhan, I have a question. Once you are providing IDP for your customer or member institutions, in that case, they have their controller. Should the controller have the real IP to connect with your IDP?
This is for Identity Federation or Eduroam?
Eduroam.
Oh, okay, for Eduroam. So the controller need to connect to the Eduroam IDP. This is a mistake. It's supposed to be Eduroam IDP/SP. So yes, the controller need to connect to the Eduroam IDP/SP public IP. So the reason why we need two public IP, one is for Cibolet Ingress, another one is for the Eduroam IDP. So there are two ways actually. Either the organization would like to set up their own Eduroam SP and then connect with the NRO. That one is fine. Or they can also connect the controller and then connect to this Eduroam IDP or SP is also fine.
And does SIFULAN provide this service over V6 or just IPv4?
At the moment, it's only IPv4, so we lack of IPv6 expertise. But theoretically, if you because Kubernetes support IPv6, I believe. So as long as because Ingress it rely on one more component called the load balancer. So and for the most of the on-prem implementation, it use MetaLB. So I'm not sure if MetaLB support IPv6, then the entire solution support IPv6. But internally, it use IPv4 internally among each component here. But to the public, I think Ingress can do translation to the IPv6. Okay, any more questions?
So I've got a quick question for you, Farhan.
Yep.
Hey,
When-
Farhan, this is Basuki.
Yeah.
Can I ask you?
Yeah, can.
Is that you measure with something like I mean the ingress, your ingress,
Mm-hmm.
that you measure the ingress traffic?
Mm-hmm.
Because when we have a cloud, I mean the commercial cloud, the problem is on the ingress and ingress costs.
Okay. So in our case, because we do like a private deployment, so we use our own server, we put in a data center. Okay, so the data center doesn't charge for the incoming and outgoing traffic. It's unlimited.
Yeah, yes, I know. I mean, you measure the ingress and all.
No, no.
Of course. But it is possible to, if you.
Yeah, I think it's possible. In Kubernetes, there's a software to do so, but I forgot what's the name that even able to collect all the sensor from each component, and you can see the entire health status of your system. And or because in front of the nodes we have a firewall and router, you can also monitor the traffic from the firewall or router point of view as well.
Okay, maybe someday, if you don't mind, you can share the traffic.
Yeah.
Which the needs. Sometimes.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
But in our case, it's quite seasonal actually, because usually the traffic will be high in the morning, where people come to their office and log into their system. That will be busy, and towards noon the traffic will going down. So that is the typical traffic that we see.
Yeah, maybe someday the idea with the other region, maybe if okay, in maybe usually people in the office hour is it's a lot of a resource, but sometimes after office hour the resource is mostly idle.
Yeah. Well, in Kubernetes, there's a feature called auto scaling. So you can set certain parameters. So let's say if the server response reach certain limit, you can create another pod to help to ease the traffic. It's like in the supermarket. Okay. So let's say if the queue is more than 4 or 5% in one cashier, so they can automatically open another cashier to spread the load. And when the load is get low, okay, then you can close the cashier, or you can scale down the number of pods. Yeah, you can do that with Kubernetes. And with the current Simulate, but also, I mean, in the perspective of Simulate, it's also depend how you would store the cookies and so on. Because if you are using the browser storage, then that will be very easy actually.
So Farhan, you've got 12 minutes left for this session.
Yeah. I have a last question. Can I ask, Terry?
Yeah,
go.
yes, Ken. Right.
Yes, I'm Farhan.
Hi.
Yes. See, this entire whatever you have given the presentation, these things will be covered in our APAN conference, right?
Yep.
See, this proxy you mentioned about the proxy. Is it about the proxy for accessing service providers, or giving only that multiple domain name can be configured kind of service? What you are doing?
Oh, it's a SIFULAN IDP as the proxy to the interfederation. So basically it's shibboleth, but shibboleth support multiple ways or multiple means to authenticate the user. One of those is SAML, means that shibboleth rely on another IDMS to perform the authentication and provide the attributes to them, and also assertion through SAML protocol.
Okay. Okay, anyhow, this entire section will be elaborately explained in APAN, right? So we will ask further questions.
Yeah. So but you may need to prepare several VMs for this hands-on before come to Singapore. But I will send another email, separate email for that.
Okay.
So my quick question was around access to the shibboleth IDP logs to do debugging of issues that are occurring at a specific IDP.
Yep.
Given they'll be buried within a Kubernetes thing, how difficult will that be for an admin person to dive in and see those logs?
Yeah, you can go inside the pods and look at the log folder as normal, as like you're accessing a VM.
Yep.
So, but it depends. Previously, we didn't put the log into the persistent storage, but the issue, right? I mean, there's a lot of requests that, because for the statistic purpose, we are using FTIX, which is the actual user are masked, so we don't know, or anonymized, we don't know who's the user. But there are certain requests that some IDP, they would like also to know who is the user. Okay, so now if there is a such request, we store the logs in a persistent storage, so that even though the pod is restarted, then it will still use the same, we still keep the log file for the analytics.
Okay. So how much more of your presentation is there, Farhan?
Finish.
Good.
No more.
Okay. Right. So is there any further questions that can be answered over Zoom rather than, or can they wait till we get to Singapore for those doing that? Okay, so it's just about morning tea time, 12:30 in Brisbane, and therefore 10:30 in China. So I'm going to call to have a break until 1 o'clock, or to be 11 o'clock in China, or in the time zone for the conference. When we get back, we have hopefully Namal will turn up. I haven't seen her yet. Is she on the call? And if not, that we can skip that. I see that Hideaki's got a presentation on Eduroam, and I have a presentation on Eduroam as well. So we'll get into those when we return at 11 o'clock / 1 o'clock / whatever time it will be where you're sitting. And thanks, Farhan, for all the detailed information about the Federation infrastructure that we'll be building over the next little while. It's been really interesting to understand that, what's happening. Okay, so I think we can stop recording for the moment. And we'll reconvene in about 35 minutes. Just look at my face on. Okay, I'll see you in 35 minutes. I'm not sure if this session will still go or not, but it was yesterday.
Like just because of that. Yeah.
Okay, here's that one. One, three. That's not supposed to go just to you, Brook. It's supposed to go to everybody. Try that again. There we go. Oh, Shahami's here. Still a few minutes before one. So it's interesting, Farhan's, what was he call it? The user management tool that he's got.
Vikings.
Vikings, that's the one. So
Yeah.
is that to allow an admin to add users and put them in various groups and so forth?
Yeah, it
Right.
does. The developer is here, Irfan.
All right. Yeah, we've actually, for our virtual mode IDP, we've got a sort of group manager, a user management piece, but could probably be improved. It's okay, but yeah. So with Malaysia and SIFULAN, what's sort of the ratio of IDPs that are proxying to an enterprise IDP compared to those just using it as a standalone IDP?
The standalone currently 1, 2. I think it's only 3 left using 4 on-prem. So mostly they will migrate it to EID, and because even we also have SIFULAN EID, but for on-prem, so means that we still can manage the IDP remotely. So it's just that they need to set up a Kubernetes, but only to run their shibboleth pods, and we can manage it from remotely and like push the config to the Kubernetes. But we moving towards moving them into EID platform, so it's make it easier.
No, the question was really about how many are actually proxying back to, say, Azure or Okta as compared to not.
Majority to Azure. I think now it's about 60%, but it will be like 80 to 90% once we deploy for the Polytechnic, because for the Polytechnic they are using Azure Office 365, and not all has they do all the public Polytechnic and community college, they have Office 365 because it's subscribed by the ministry, but not all has AD or Open LDAP in their institutions.
Right.
So we told them, okay, in this case, okay, let's just connect with your Azure AD. In fact, it's much better because there is some multi-factor authentication, and Azure AD responded well to the refetch MFA request. So that's the reason why. So probably it will be in next couple of months, like before end of the year, I think the ratio will be like 80% will be proxy.
Right.
Yeah,
with the
because we need to,
stuff. Sorry.
Yeah, we need to bring in like 141 sites.
That should be fun. Keep it busy.
Yeah, but luckily because it's SIFULAN EID is very easy to deploy an IDP. So yeah, it can complete on time, because to set up and customize for each IDP takes about half an hour. So yeah, we can achieve that before the end of the year.
Yeah, ours is a bit more complex because we've got to migrate the existing configuration of an on-prem IDP, lots of bilateral services and all sorts of other rubbish that they've built up over the past 12 years.
But now is because previously, some of the challenge is for the on-prem that want to move to EID. They are using shibboleth 3, now shibboleth 4. So we need to do some adjustment, and now the latest shibboleth is what, 4.1, right? Or 4.2, I forgot.
4.1.2, I think, or 3 or 4.
Yeah, so, and also the config has changed a bit. So now we are preparing the template for the latest one and slowly migrating the 4.0 to the latest one. For our workshop in Singapore will be based on the latest one.
Okay, so it's 4.2.1.
Yeah.
So latest. With regards to your multi-factor authentication stuff, have you set up it so it does the refeds profile?
Yeah, using the refeds profile and refeds MFA.
And sort of converting to whatever attribute Azure sends back to the thing.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Well, the RFA is just rely on the backend IDP to decide which MFA. But we do also have, for example, like SIFULAN virtual home. We are not using AZUREady.
Yep.
But we support the refed MFA. So we install privacy idea as for the MFA. So it will generate privacy idea. It's a software called privacy idea. So the MFA is provided by privacy idea. So Shibboleth Shibboleth will ask user to do authentication, and then it also asks privacy idea to do the MFA to the end users. So if both match, then Shibboleth will release the attributes.
You provide a link to that MFA option?
Yeah, I will. Let me see.
Either via Slack or in the channel or
there, yeah, I will send.
But we're still using the old Google Authenticator as our sort of second factory.
Well, I mean for the end users, they because it's TOTP is a standard protocol, so you can use Google Authenticator to provide you the TOTP code. But if you would like to use like a push, because privacy idea also support for push, like you press the button to authorize. So in that case, then you need to install privacy idea software on your phone. But if you base on TOTP, then any TOTP compatible software you can use.
Yeah, I quite like the push option. Okay, so people are starting to come back, which is good. Give them a few more minutes, or 2 or 3. All right, thanks, Farhan. Share that with everyone. So it's in the hard work. It's good. Cool. Okay, we've got a so I can't see Naval name here yet. Okay, this afternoon we're talking about Eduroam. So this is going to be my beginner's guide, and I'm a beginner as well for doing Eduroam. And after I've finished, we'll have the expert, the guru, Hideaki, tell us really what is supposed to happen when we do Eduroam. So let's get into it. I need to restart this share because I've forgotten to click on the magic button which says share sound. Let's start it over again. Share it. Okay, so quick one, what is Eduroam? We'll start to these things. Eduroam provides simple, easy, secure connectivity from thousands of hotspots across more than 100 countries. It's a secure wireless connectivity service for staff, students, and others at higher education institutions. And it's a fantastic service. I love using it when I'm traveling. But we'll just have a quick look at the Eduroam video and see what they have to say.
Eduroam stands.
Can everyone see that and we can hear it? Okay. So we'll keep that going.
Eduroam stands for Education Roaming. It provides secure and easy-to-use Wi-Fi access in thousands of locations in more than 100 countries. Once you've connected for the first time, you never need to enter your details again. Eduroam will automatically connect you whenever you're in range of an Eduroam hotspot. The best thing is, the hotspot you're using never sees your details. So, wherever you're roaming, you can love to Eduroam. Eduroam. Simple, easy, and secure.
Those are the three words we love to hear. Simple, easy, and secure. And I think it is all of those. So we'll get back to sharing. Oops, big screen.
Easy is depend on your device.
It's getting better and better all the time. Yeah. I can figure it on my iPhone and it just worked. It just brilliant.
And the
for iPhone, yes. For Android, oh, you may cry.
And the never know your details is actually dependent on your institution's implementation or whether you use a service like Get Eduroam. So actually, you know, there's a need for your institution to do a good job as well to help protect your privacy.
But generally, yes, it's easy and secure. Generally.
So I think the first thing, if somebody's going to set up themselves as the roaming operator for their nation, is to actually understand what Eduroam is in much more detail than what I'm going to provide here. And Eduroam provides a ton of documentation at their site, the Eduroam support, Eduroam documentation. And this is where I've basically got all this information from. They have a compliance statement, so it outlines the minimal technical and organisational standards that are required. So that was something Brook and Farhan were just talking about. Some of those standards are probably not being met properly or completely by organisations who've been doing Eduroam for a significant time. So it might be time to knock on their door and say, hey, let's get you up to speed. There's a Jinan Confederation policy documentation. This is a set of documents that describe the service and operation of the European Eduroam Confederation. There's the Eduroam Confederation policy document, which is the legal framework which we live in to ensure that all the good legal stuff's happening, everyone's signing on the dotted line to provide the best service they can. And then there's the Eduroam service documentation, which is more the technical stuff around being part of Eduroam. There's a whole bunch of other related documents, and probably the one that you'd want to visit is their how-to wiki for when you first go and set up your Eduroam roaming operator, or you're working with your organizations to help them set up their identity providers and service providers in Eduroam. And there's also a ton of other stuff that's in there, so information about gotchas that can cause you issues, how to set up various different flavors of software to work with this stuff. And as I said, much more documentation in the how-tos wiki about deployment, promoting, and supporting Eduroam. So it's not just a technical thing. There's a lot of support and engagements that you'd want to do to make sure that your nation, your users at universities and so forth are getting the best possible outcomes from using Eduroam. There is some Eduroam technical documentation, a lot of that, and it's broken down into various categories. I'm only going to have a look at the second one there, that I am an IT manager or staff member from a potential national roaming operator organization, and I want to set up a national level roaming operator infrastructure. You'd probably also, as the roaming operator, want to look at how to set up an Eduroam on site and how to support end users, because that's stuff you'll be using to train your university IT folk on how to do Eduroam at their institutions. So for a roaming operator, one of the tasks I think is to run training courses or run engagement activities that will highlight Eduroam as a great service and provide the technical information to make sure that your universities are setting it up correctly for your users to have a painless and fun experience when using Eduroam, and a secure experience. So deploying Eduroam at a national level, I found that there's three major tasks that you'll be involved in. First of those is becoming a roaming operator, and I'll go into these in more detail in further slides. But there are some administrative requirements involved, and there's some information management requirements involved, and we'll have a look at those shortly. Once you've got your that you've been identified as the roaming operator, you need to set up your technology and operate the Federation Level Radius Server, and we'll tag that as the FLR. You'll see these acronyms popping up all the time in the documentation, so you need to be aware of what these mean, otherwise you'll be going back and forwards. You'll pick it up pretty quickly. With the Radius server, there's some minimum hardware requirements, some software requirements, and setup required, and they provide a bunch of options for the Radius server to use. They provide three, and I'll look at those shortly. And finally, once you've got it all set up and it's running, you need to continually monitor it and generate logs that can be used to provide statistics about how well your national Radius server and national Eduroam instance is actually performing. Without that sort of information, you're sort of running blind. You're not sure how well things are going. And I think I'll show you that we'll need to do some work in that space as part of this program. So becoming the national roaming operator.
Sorry. In some documentation or some presentation, sometimes the term roaming operator and the federation level radius just combined as a NRO, national roaming organization operator. So like in Malaysia, we just call NRO to
okay.
Make it short.
So I'm learning already.
And the reason we don't use the N is because some N's don't like being called N's. So yeah, instead of having economies or territories, so we've dropped the national bit because they're not. They're actually limited by country code top level domain, which strangely enough doesn't necessarily reflect country codes, but that's a different debate.
So, as one of the tasks that are involved in the administrative requirements for being a roaming operator is that you're managing and supervising the Eduroam identity providers within your zone. You're managing and supervising the Eduroam service providers in that same zone, and you're keeping the authentication logs, and you're fulfilling uptime requirements. So those are the sort of things you need to be considering and how to do that. And the document called Eduroam Service Definition and Implementation Plan is recommended as a document that you should read as part of your setup of your roaming operator gig, and it highly recommends that you understand it, not just read it, but understand the requirements. You also need to commit to the Eduroam policy. I'm not going to actually dive into these documents, but the Eduroam policy itself is the one that you as the Eduroam operator or the roaming operator will need to sign and send off to Eduroam to actually become the roaming operator and to get connected into the hierarchy of radius servers. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there about what you need to do, what requirements you have, and at the bottom, sign on the dotted line to become the roaming operator. Another task is information management, or the requirement is to maintain the information about your particular area or zone and maintain a comprehensive overview of the over the Eduroam within its service area. So report about the Federation's state regularly. So what IDPs you have in your area, your service area, and what service providers and their locations and so forth. And this information is used by Eduroam to provide maps and useful information to users about where they can find Eduroam as a service and which institutions are participating in Eduroam. And I think we're not doing a very good job in the Asia Pacific region in keeping that information up to date within Eduroam. They provide an Eduroam database where this information about the ROs is kept, and it's all the Eduroam SPs and IDP information is stored there. And this information appears on the Eduroam monitoring site. We might just quickly jump over to the monitoring site though. I'll have a quick squiz at that. So this is the monitoring site that Eduroam provides. You can see all of the nations that are involved in Eduroam, and they've broken it down into the various regions. There's the APAN region, which is a bit bigger than I would have thought APAN would have been. But, places, we've got some interesting ones in here. Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, there's a few ones that don't really fall within the general work that we do. We can see that there are a good number of participating nations and players within Eduroam. And we can see that there's a good number of service providers and IDPs and services, but I think these numbers are a bit minimal in some places. I'm not actually sure what the difference are. These are service locations. I still don't understand this table a bit better. Okay, so in here we also got some maps. So you can see service location maps. And we can dive into the APAN region. And we can see as we dive and go further in, we get more and more information about what's actually available. Thailand seems to be doing a pretty good job on keeping the number of locations up to date. They all seem to be in the one spot.
Actually, the information in the monitor the Eduroam .org is a dynamic. So the website will pull the this information from the roaming operator. Hang on. So okay, so it will pull data from a roaming operator, and the roaming operator need to provide this information through a standard sort of like a XML format information. During the is it backfire, Brook, or even earlier before backfire?
The Zeep project.
Probably in Zeep.
Zeep project, yeah. So the Zeep project developed some tools, but mainly based on Eduroam RO portal developed by some Greece RAN, I think. So they call it DJ and RO. I believe that DJ stands for Django and RO. So this portal, these tools can help RO to generate this statistic, like a number of IDP, number of SP, number of locations, and also even it can also generate the configuration for the radius server, so RedSec. So even in Malaysia, how we manage the our Eduroam infrastructure at the roaming organization level, we use DJ and RO, of course, with some automation at the back end. So we rarely touch the server to do some configuration.
Right. So what else we got here? We've got the monitoring piece, which seems to be responding. Statistics. Okay. Anyway, we'll come back to that later. So there is this data collection that's performed, and it needs to be performed by the roaming operator to send information back to Eduroam so that its reporting tools can produce the appropriate reports. Operating a federation level radius server, so the FLR. The roaming operator may outsource this operation to its technical infrastructure or some third party if they choose. But the roaming operator will remain responsible for Eduroam within its service area. So you can have somebody else run the federation radius server, but you're, as the roaming operator, still responsible for its operation. I don't know how many have actually outsourced it to a third party, but it's an option if you need to.
Like in Malaysia, it's not really a third party, it's like a joint effort. So the Myran is responsible for the Eduroam development in Malaysia, but in terms of operation, helping them as well, and obviously be part of the team that responsible for Eduroam Malaysia. So it's like a collaboration. That's the situation in Malaysia.
Yep. So I assume it would vary from country to country or nation to nation or area to area, depending on what sort of technical skills are available within the NREN.
I think that probably the best example is that the company Eduroam is provides the technology behind the service in the United States, but Internet2 is the roaming operator. So they have the formality of running the service and defining the rules, but the technical operation can be someone else. And so that's why it's always a library consortium, a consortium of universities, or a research network that is the roaming operator, and not a commercial.
I think at some point, Cordet used to be the roaming operator, with Arnet being the provider of the radius server. I think that changed some time ago. I could be wrong. I'm just.
And so, even in the US originally, it was the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, which was but the roaming operator and the organization that provided the technology, and then they handed that to Internet 2 and continued with the operation of the underlying infrastructure.
So the Federation Radius server itself is used for two functions. It connects the Eduroam identity providers, and which is all the Radius servers at the universities, and all the Eduroam service providers, so the wireless access points at each with each other. So it's the first step in the hierarchy. It also provides an uplink to the Federation to all the other Eduroam federations. So it's the stepping stone to other federations to get those authentications happening across the world. Your hardware requirements for running the Federation Radius server, it's a fairly lightweight protocol. So the documentation says it's a fairly lightweight infrastructure is fine, but service uptime is paramount. So this needs to be really a 24/7 service with minimal server downtime and minimal outages, and if possible, zero outages. So any upgrades or other work should be arranged around a highly available service so that you're not interrupting service for users. And that should be fairly easy to implement. They also state that Eduroam doesn't have any pre-prescribed radius implementation, but they recommend 3 different radius implementations. Radiator, which I'm actually aware of myself, I've set one of those up many years ago, is the most popular. There's the RadSec proxy, which I've never heard of before, and then the free radius, which I've also heard of. It's just another radius server. I'd recommend, as a beginner, just picking one of these. Probably the Radiator is to get the most popular and the best support, because you're looking to get assistance from other Eduroam roaming operators when you set this stuff up. Using technology that's proven is probably the best way to go forward, and not trying to jam in something else.
I'm biased in this regard, Terry, and as always,
majority is RadSec proxy for the NRO.
Yeah, and the reason for that is that RadSec proxy is only able to be a radius proxy. It's not able to do any other functions. So it's very simple for a roaming operator, and it avoids the ability to accidentally terminate authentication requests for unknown domains. So we've had instances before with free radius, people trying to use the Microsoft tool, because Microsoft has an embedded radius.
NPS.
Yeah, NPS. And accidentally doing authentication for every unknown domain in their environment. So in effect, allowing the user to send a password to a server from a sort of a default key. And this is this is an accidental configuration. It's not purposeful by the roaming operators. They're not trying to steal your passwords, but RadSec proxy eliminates the ability of this to happen because you're only able to pass it on to somewhere else. So it actually means the NREN itself has to run an instance of RadSec proxy to route all of the traffic, and they have to run a separate tool to even terminate the accounts for NREN staff themselves. And it eliminates mistakes.
Yes. So typically the RadSec proxy, the roaming operator, they just need to, their task is only to route the authentication to the right IDP according to the realm. So RadSec proxy is right tools to do so, even though you can do that as well with free radius 2 or free radius 3, but it's just a bit too much for RO. RadSec proxy is much more simpler and easier to operate. But at the IDP level or SP level, they can implement FreeRadius 2 or FreeRadius 3. Okay, for the SP, they can just use RedSec proxy is sufficient as well because they don't do authentication. So
the message there is to keep it simple, and we have RedSec proxy.
Yeah. And actually, it's quite robust if all configured correctly. So probably you won't need to touch the IDP for many years.
Okay. So gauging your federation's performance, monitoring. So you need to look at system utilization, hardware health, and network reachability. So these are just 3 things that you should be monitoring. And it recommends using whatever monitoring tool works for your organization. I just provide some examples of Nagios and Synca. They're fairly simple to configure monitoring tools, but making sure that the system's up, its hardware is healthy, and its network is reachable. You're monitoring your service. You need to also provide statistics about what's happening in your FLR, your Federation Level Radius server, and configure your server to provide FTX reporting back to Eduroam. This is very important to show how successful a service is in your area of responsibility. If you can't show that, then people will say, why are we doing this? It's not providing any benefit for anybody, or can't be shown to be providing benefit. The other thing, which isn't actually in their documentation, in the standard documentation, but it's there, is ensuring that your university IT folk are well trained in how to set up this stuff at their institutions. Brook indicated earlier, and I think Farhan also said that there are some institutions that do it badly. So having good training and good content material for your IDPs and service provider folk is of great value. To run training events regularly, to work through the guides that are provided by Eduroam, so how to deploy Eduroam on site or on campus, and how to support your end users is very important to make sure that everything's going to work smoothly for your users when they hit Eduroam. And then providing ongoing support. So the running operator will be supporting each connected institution, as IDPs and SPs. Each connected institution will be supporting their end users. And I see this as being a fairly light support load if it's all set up and running correctly. As Brian mentioned just earlier, once you've got your RadSec server running and configured, it should just do its thing and not require any touching, and it shouldn't be causing any support issues or support load on your support team's desk or on the university support. If it is, then you need to go back and have a look. The other thing I did when setting this little presentation up was have a look at the reporting stuff, and built this table with all of the nations that are of interest to us. The first column is which nation it is. The second column is, are they doing any sort of reporting? And I found a few that aren't. There's no reporting happening. And I found some that are registered but don't seem to have signed any policy documentation in this area. A lot of folk don't seem to be providing FTX to Eduroam. So that's, I think, something we need to work on. And those that I've got listed here is just listed, are connected or have provided FTX information in the past, but don't seem to be doing it now. If you actually go and look at the thing, click on, say, Malaysia. I'll pick on you, Farhan. If you click on that, and let's see if I can use that now.
Actually, we do provide, but I don't know why I said missed it.
Let's see that one there. Go to monitoring and FTX. No, that's going to apply. Go down to Malaysia. And we click on the statistics graph. Oh no, I tell a lie. I'll have to go and redo that because it came back this morning and didn't have anything. So maybe it was the reporting service was broken.
Well, because it's weekend.
Well, there is a bit of usage. Okay, I'll go back and fix that that table up.
Okay, all right.
There were some there are some issues with the reporting side of things that I think need addressing. And that a lot of folk, as I said, aren't providing any FTX logs at all.
I mean, I think one of the things that we allow is the reason the policy might not be in place is because Eduroamers are never allowed to be an island. So we never allow a deployment that isn't connected upstream. So we often do that as a pilot in order to lower the barrier to entry, because we know that there's some work that you have to do to make that happen. And so we also don't hand over the official designation of Eduroam to an economy until they've deployed 3 sites. Usually the heuristic is 3, because we want to know that you're a good supporter of the service and that you're going to include other educational institutions in your environment. Because we don't want to hand in effect, it becomes a monopoly right, and we don't want to hand it to an organization that isn't going to share with the wider community. And so that's why we allow you to do this work without signing policy documents. But yes, that does need to get completed eventually, and because we want all of the things in line. And one of the reasons for FTX is some people don't like the real-time telemetry information to be shared upstream because it actually shows usage information. But there are ways of removing identifiable information from those usage logs or delaying their transmission so that they're still useful for statistics, but they're not useful for user tracking.
So just looking at this particular table, which is about the facts about Eduroam. So Bangladesh, according to this, has not provided a signed document to a signed policy document. And there's a few others in there that are of concern. So these things we'll work through. Looking at the next page, we've got Pakistan's, they're probably now appearing there, so I need to go through this again. And I've also found that Cambodia, Vietnam and Bhutan aren't listed at all on any of the Eduroam sites, so we probably need to work on that.
Terry, good morning.
Yep. Morning.
This is Taurit from Bangladesh. So what is the way we can go ahead with signing the policy? What is the policy of signing the policy? That is my question.
So if we go to their site, in here, in their
that means it is available somewhere over there, right?
Yep, I'm just trying to get for you now. So under their support, integrating Eduroam documentation, how-tos. So under the administrative requirements is the policy document for signing. So again, got Federation Policy Declaration. Read all through that, and you sign at the bottom in Appendix A, Membership Declaration.
Okay, then we have to send it to Jinan somewhere.
I'd assume somewhere in here it'll tell you where to send it. I haven't actually read this yet, so.
Okay, okay. I will do that. I will do
You
that.
just need to get it to someone like Hideaki, who is one of your members of the Global Eduroam Governance Committee, or Warwick Mitchell. So hopefully they'll be present in Nepal, and we can, ahead of that, we can try and clear up some of the paperwork issues. But generally, I think they used to be collected by me, and I'm not too sure what the policy is post me leaving the organization. But
yes, probably you were too flexible. That's why we could get in without signing the policy.
Yeah, because so your site is officially a pilot, so that's why it might be listed in the light blue color in some of the animations rather than in the dark blue. So that's the site. Yeah, and those pilots can run for a very long time for often very good reasons. So it's not an issue. It's better to have a collaborator that's working on it actively on a pilot than to deny people. Because if we had to deny you access to Eduroam until everything was in order, then you might not have started the process even. So, and the same goes for what was it, Bhutan, Cambodia, and Vietnam. Is that? Yeah, and any Pacific nations as well, right? Unfortunately, the P in APAN is not well represented at all, and so there's a lot of Pacific nations that are not represented.
Papua New Guinea as well.
Yeah, Timor-Leste. Luckily, the University of South Pacific has its tentacles out into some Pacific areas, and so there's more coverage because of that. But it doesn't mean that it's wide coverage even in the territories that the Uni of South Pacific exists.
Okay. So I see just from a very beginning basic type of view that things we need to work on is assisting the nations who aren't on Eduroam to get there. To look at FTIX reporting, get most of the nations doing that, and ensure all the policy work is done, and ensure the Eduroam database is populated correctly. So that's my beginner's guide. I'm now going to hand over to Hideaki, who will give us a much more detailed or better view of what Eduroam is. And hopefully I wasn't too far off the mark with what I've just spoken about. So over to you, Hideaki. I'll stop sharing and you can take over.
Okay. Okay, hope this is the correct one. So I'm Hideaki Goto from Tohoku University, and as well as the National Institute of Informatics in Japan. And Terry has already explained a lot about the Eduroam basics, so I'm going to skip some slides. My slides will be uploaded later. So maybe I can skip this, but the basic idea is the same as the SAM of federation. We have identity providers and service providers, and we connect them each other. And what is Eduroam? I can skip this, and maybe you can see this easily. And Eduroam has a long history. It's almost 20 years, if I remember correctly. And as you can see, most of the world is covered by the Eduroam. But so from now on, I'm going to explain something more advanced. So this slide shows how we developed Eduroam in Japan. And Eduroam is originally for research and education communities, and the basically the Eduroam access points are on campus, but we wanted to use Eduroam outside the campus as well. So we wanted to make the world a virtual campus. So we deployed some off-campus Eduroam access points. And this has a long history. We began this around 2011. And we had some collaboration with commercial operators. And this has created a new option for outsourcing campus wireless LAN systems. So even if the universities do not have any technician, they can ask some commercial operators to deploy the Wi-Fi access points. So, and of course, in the world we have some more off-campus Eduroam, and this slide shows the very basic architecture of Eduroam. And for example, if a user from an institution D in Japan visit another institution called A in the Netherlands, then the access request is sent through the Eduroam Federation network, and the authentication is performed at the home institution here, and the access accept or reject is sent back to the access point. So how to join and deploy Eduroam? As Terry has explained, there are some paperwork, but basically I'm going to talk about the architecture using some figures. So in the APAN Asia Pacific region, we have two proxies, and this is these are top-level proxies. One is in Hong Kong, and another is in Australia. And you need to set up a national roaming operator. So officially, this is called roaming operator, or RO. And this is an organization. And Redis proxy is required. And of course, we need some people who operate the proxy. And we connect institutions, universities, schools, anything related to research and education. And at each institution, they have some access points. And they have Redis IDP as well, identity provider. And of course, this is very basic, but it's better to have redundancy. So roaming operator is encouraged to have multiple Redis proxies. And when you are going to deploy many access points, I recommend you to choose a passpoint capable one. The reason I'm going to explain it later. And the software, Terry has already explained. We use FreeRadius, Radiator, and there are some Radius appliances. And you may use managed or hosted service. And please ask Farhan. He's knowledgeable. And optionally, you may use Radsec proxy. And the platform, you need any operating system and web server, and some commands, and Eduroam database stuff. And on the client side, we can use OS operating system built-in authenticators. We can use Android, iOS, macOS, Windows, Linux, Chrome OS, Chromebooks. They all support Eduroam. And recently, the Get Eduroam app application has become popular. And this uses the Eduroam chat profile. So we used to have Eduroam chat before, but Get Eduroam is a new kind of application. So we can improve the user experience. So, for example, the users do not need to type in identity and passwords. So the user can simply log into the university's portal and download the profile, and that's all. And the device is automatically connected to Eduroam. No ID or no password at all. And here the figure shows the basic architecture, basic network. So we have national roaming operator, which is responsible for stable and continuous operation in that region. And one note is here, the roaming operator should try separating the membership from other services. Eduroam is for any research and education institution in that territory or the country. So I recommend it strongly. And here one advanced network. So as I said, off-campus Eduroam is becoming popular worldwide. So not only at university, not only in schools, we can use Eduroam outside the campus, off campus. So for example, if you visit some cafes or the bars, pubs near the university, you could get Eduroam. But of course, some support is required from the nearby university or the national roaming operators. And if you visit some shopping malls, for example, you could find Eduroam service as well. So if you want to get a nice coffee, you can ask nearby university to support the cafes around the university. This is much more advanced. Open roaming is now under development worldwide, and open roaming is a kind of roaming system, and this open roaming technology, many technologies from Eduroam, and we share the same technologies basically. And the difference is while Eduroam is for research and education people, open roaming is open to everyone. Anyone can use open roaming. So the open roaming, by deploying open roaming access points, everyone can get on the Wi-Fi. But Eduroam is a member of open roaming. So if your organization prefer, then your organization can allow the users to get on open roaming, and the users can get on the Wi-Fi using Eduroam credentials. Oh, nice comments from Farhan. We have Hedgerow too at the mosque in Malaysia. Wow, that's good. So, for example, we have national roaming operator here. This roaming operator supports open roaming in addition to Hedgerow, and tourist sites will have open roaming. Shopping malls will have open roaming, but not Hedgerow. But there's a mechanism to accept Hedgerow credentials on open roaming. In other sites, for example, the shopping mall has both Hedgerow and open roaming service. And when you get on a train, you could use open roaming, and even in an aircraft, you could use open roaming. You will be able to use open roaming in the near future. And the open roaming is the Eduroam-like seamless connection experience for everyone. And it's not limited to research and education community. And okay, we can skip this. And we have already some operators worldwide participating in open roaming. And in Japan's case, we have a roaming federation called Cityroam, and Cityroam provides Eduroam and open roaming service. And if you have a chance to come to Tokyo, you can experience, you can try this. In Nishishi Shinjuku region, you can get on Eduroam service on 22 poles. And as you can see, you can visit the park, and you can get on Eduroam and study or work there. So to summarize, Hedgerow is the world standard Wi-Fi roaming system, and Hedgerow provides secure and automatic connection. Visitor access is quite easy, and off-campus Hedgerow is becoming popular. And I didn't explain this, but the school Hedgerow is emerging. To get government funding, consider adding open roaming for citizens' use, not limited to RME. Of course, the funding is very important. So if you need the money, please ask your government to deploy open roaming. Then we will be able to add Eduroam service quite easily. And for information, you can join Slack. And for more details about Eduroam and open roaming combined system, you can visit Cityroam website. And this is the last slide. And we have a project in Japan, and we began a project in 2021, last year. And Kyoto University and a company, Local 24, is included. And we Tohoku University, NII, and Jinan organized the party. And we are now developing a nice system for 5G and Wi-Fi convergence. For example, if a student get a contract with a telecom operator, the authentication can be made using the SIM card. So it's like a carrier offloading, carrier Wi-Fi. So using SIM card, of course, there's no need to type in ID and password. The device is automatically connected to Wi-Fi. So that's all. Thank you. Any questions?
So any questions for Hideaki for myself about Eduroam? I think we've got a bit of work to do to get all the nations up to speed and bring on some of those who haven't got Eduroam. But I don't think it's a task too big for us as a team.
Yes.
Okay, so
Eduroam, yeah, Eduroam used to be the roaming system for research and education, but this is Eduroam has become a driving force for the general roaming system called open roaming. So the architecture, the current slide shows the future architecture, and this has a potential for changing the society. So we will have a digital transformation. Eduroam has a potential to support it. And then, of course, education is the source of country's power. So it's very important. So
I have one question.
Yeah.
Basically, as you mentioned, you have Eduroam inside the campus, and for offline, you use open roaming, something like that. How can we convince the, let's say, the hotel or supermarket any side for them to accept to deploy the open roaming?
Yes, of course, universities are so busy, they can't support the off-campus Eduroam and the open roaming systems. So we ask some commercial internet service providers to deploy the Wi-Fi access points. So in the hotel's case, the hotel has a contract with an ISP, and the ISP has a roaming agreement with the national roaming operator. Then they can connect the radius proxies.
So you don't talk to the hotel, you talk to their ISPs to make it happen?
So the ISPs provide a kind of managed Wi-Fi service. Managed Wi-Fi service should include Eduroam and open roaming. So we are encouraging ISPs to introduce such business.
Cool. Is GovRoam still a thing?
We haven't introduced GovRoam, but the GovRoam it looks an international one, but basically the GovRoam is ran at each country at the moment.
All right, so it's not federated between countries.
Yeah, no.
I think with the exception of Benelux, I think the Benelux countries have GovRoam roaming, but GovRoam in the UK, for instance, is not compatible with GovRoam in other places. But actually, I think AnyRoam runs the GovRoam service in the US, and they're actually seeing there's actually a lot of interest just from those government entities in being able to simplify the access for government employees. And so in the Netherlands, the first organization they got on board was the tax office, which was very useful because once the tax office agrees to something, everyone else is usually much less paranoid than the tax office. And so the service was quickly adopted by lots of other government organizations. And so if your NREN has a remit to support government, in addition to research and education, that's a way that you can offer a service that can be segregated, and sometimes they'll equally support VLAN allocation so that Eduroam users, open roaming users, can access the network equally on the same infrastructure. So if you need to differentiate your service, there's already brands that exist, to do that work.
Yes, and as I explained, the Tokyo Metropolitan Government became interested in open roaming. They are not interested in GovRoam at all. So the government officials can use open roaming.
The other place that Eduroam's been deployed in Australia is across the hospitals, because we have a lot of students that actually work and study at the hospitals. So giving them Eduroam made their connectivity to the network easier. And it's always good if you've got a sick person, you can take your Eduroam to the hospital too.
And I can see a comment from Brook, great for apartment buildings where the coverage is limited. Yes. Yes, and in 5G cellular network, we use a higher frequency, and the radio wave won't penetrate into the buildings. So it's much harder for us to get the telephone radio. So in that case, we could use Wi-Fi, and there's a technology to allow talking on the phone via Wi-Fi. Okay.
And I think
there are 2 telcos in Malaysia that provide voice over Wi-Fi, and one of those is the telco that I use. Yes, so it's nice because my house has limited coverage.
So
one question.
No, I think there are not end device compatibility issues unless you've got very old devices. So devices that can do Eduroam can do open roaming. So there is no difference in those handsets. The likelihood that people have handsets that don't support Eduroam these days is very, very small. But there are some older Android devices still in existence that don't do the certificate verification. So that could be maybe an issue that you're thinking of. I'm not too sure what issue you're referring to.
The lowest Android version that I have tried was 4.3 using TLS. It works, but of course in combination with profile generated by Eduroam Cat. But the phone is extremely slow.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of that session and to the end of APAN 54 content and training for the iFIRExMAN project. I hope you've enjoyed it and hope you've got something from today, yesterday and Monday's activities. I was really quite impressed on Monday with the amount of activity that's occurring in the federated identity space across the region. It's really good to see that activity, and hopefully we can continue that on. I'm collecting all of the slides, and thank you, Hideaki, for your slides and for your presentation. And I'll be distributing them out to the emails that we've captured in the registration, the daily registration spreadsheet, and to the task force IAM list. So if you're not on that list, you can join that to get emails of activities and things that are happening. And we've also got
I have one question. I'm Jamilur Rahman from Bhutan.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks for arranging such session. Apart from this architectural and orchestrational presentation, I'm focusing on Eduroam operation basically. There's lots of troubleshooting issues in Eduroam operation, like with the same cat, we cannot, our user cannot connect from either Android or iOS or vice versa, or sometimes IRS cannot communicate with FLR and showing zombie or dead due to lack of responses and so on. Even I have set up our Eduroam endpoints according to our standard documents given by Jinan and you also, because I have to act as roaming operator in Bangladesh. But so my point or question is, as Eduroam has lots of troubleshooting issues that needs to be resolved by any roaming operators, can we do any online or offline gather or meeting to discuss over those troubleshooting discussion? And that meeting, all roaming operators from other nations may be joined and share their experience over any existing problem of others, because most of the presentation regarding Eduroam is based on the updates and general architectural overview, but no one care about the existing challenges which is continuously faced by any roaming operator. Even no solid resolution cannot be found by internet or Google. So can we take such initiative? I don't know, is it feasible or viable from Eduroam perspective? That's my.
I'm happy to take that forward and see if we can organise a workshop or a session where we get people from Eduroam, experienced Eduroam operators together to discuss issues that people are having. I might work with Brook and Farhan and others to get something like that happening. I'd probably be shooting for somewhere in September after we've done the APAN, APNIC workshops. We'll try and organise something like that and post that invitation to everyone through the various channels that we have. And we'll try and round up some folk in the Eduroam space. I'm sure we can get someone from ARNet and probably someone from Japan's roaming operator as well, who's got some good experience with this stuff.
You could even start a discussion within Hoover and organise a random event of people that you can collect together. So I would suggest looking. I certainly flagged Eduroam as one of my interests within the Hoover environment, and maybe other people did as well. So you could look for attendees that that are interested in that. I see 14 people, and you're not one of them. But maybe maybe you can create a birds of a feather group to discuss that and try and get the issue maybe sorted out during this APAN while people are still around.
Well, I have a few comments on that. So based on the experience my experience supporting Eduroam in Malaysia, there are two ways to help you to help reduce the troubleshooting overhead. So number one is for the IDP to have sort of like a uniform implementation. So to achieve this, we SIFULAN develop Eduroam Idp rapid deployment tools, so that the university just can use the tools to set up the IDP and link with the directory service. Because of this, so pretty much we know that each site service, if they start using some other tools or some other software, then if they come to us, we just say, sorry, we don't know that software. So if you want to get a full support, then just use the same uniform tools. That's number one. And for the end user, actually, Eduroam CAT has been a great tool to reduce the difficulties for the end user to set up Eduroam in their device. The only thing is that sometimes most of the issue is the Eduroam CAT the profile wasn't properly configured, particularly on the EAP, the server configuration. So for example, if they're using a self-signed certificate for the Eduroam IDP server, then they need to upload the CA certificate as well. Otherwise, some of the device would not accept or ignore the authentication from the IDP. Okay, but there's another way to solve this is by using Eduroam IDP as a service and use another means for the end user to obtain the credential, like what we currently introducing in Malaysia, like the get.eduroam.my, and also the for the upcoming we will do another hands-on in Nepal. So we will touch on how to set up this Eduroam IDP as a service and use Identity Federation to obtain the credential. And for the end user to set up, they can use either Get Eduroam apps or they can use Eduroam CAT as well, because this is just like a one IDP for everyone. So it's much easier for you to troubleshoot and support. So that based on our experience in Malaysia, my experience supporting Eduroam in Malaysia.
So does that help?
Yes, thank you, Farhan. Special thanks to you for explaining your experience. Thank you.
Welcome. I like what Brook's comment is. The correct answer is cost €500 per hour. Yeah, I hope so.
Okay, so
in all serious, oh sorry Terry, but in all seriousness, the reason Eduroam is free for NRENs to deploy is we expect some level of quality in the service that's deployed, universally, and so that means the campus as well, not just the roaming operators, and also the top level services. So the reason we don't charge is because we have, if centrally. If we had to not take European Union funding, the bill that we would send you would be eye-watering, right? The cost of the infrastructure and the development that goes into that is expensive. And I think we discussed it before, right? There's a big difference between the AAF's bare minimum staff to run their federation and the additional staff that add on the value-added services on top of that. And the same thing with Eduroam. So your institutions, if they're not doing, you're free to charge your institutions for their participation in Eduroam, and maybe you should make it clear that doing it a standardized way is cheaper than them going down a separate path.
Saw that the Eduroam IDP is a service as an option as well, and we've actually set the AAF up to use that particular service because we don't want to run our own radius service, so we just piggybacked off that, and it just works really nicely. You get a certificate, and away you go.
Yeah, even for organization that has less than 200 members, the Eduroam CAT is also provide managed IDP, so you don't have, and even now there is a Eduroam SP2. So in fact, you don't need, almost no need to invest anything at your institution.
Okay, so I'm going to call it a day. Thanks everybody. It's been great to see so many people turn up to this this event over the past 3 days, and we'll hopefully keep in contact and see some of you in Singapore, and hopefully a whole lot more of you in Nepal in February or March next year. Thanks for your time, thanks for listening, and thanks for learning. And
yeah, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. So 91 people, 91 unique people, that's a lot.
that's pretty good. Now all I have to do is do my thing on Friday at the close.
Yeah, I'm not too sure what stats you want, but I've put some things in the
spreadsheet,
the stats page, and also I worked out a Google Sheet formula to aggregate people's email addresses if they've provided it at least once across the across the event. There's obviously some people that haven't.
Yep, I've seen that. Thanks, Brook, for your time this week.
Not over. I have to put on a shirt and do my hair and chair a session tomorrow. And I'm giving a
bucket into that.
Because Douglas is busy, and so Douglas is obviously the first preference of the program committee, and I am down the list. And then Laos has the Laos and Bhutan project. I'm giving a presentation, but it's 7 o'clock tonight. Didn't realize it was so late because
right.
it's actually Bhutan time rather than Laos time, and it's even later. Well, I guess they are shifted over, so I didn't realize. At least it's not a half hour or 45-minute time zone. Oh, wow. Someone else has turned up. Is this guy the Mongolian guy? I'm going to try and look him up in the Hoover.
Yes, it's me. Hey, Brook.
Ah, long time no anything.
Yeah, sorry about that. I missed you guys.
But strangely enough, I've got a project with Mongolia, and apologies for the sound of Slack meetings coming along, Slack notifications. But yeah, we're likely to be at the Mongolian NOG meeting in October to
it's
try
coming up October.
Yeah, so toward the end of October is MN NOG, and we're trying to run an NREN, what do you call it? Like an NREN futures workshop from Mongolia, and so that should happen. We should know more soon, whether that funding's coming through. But we're also doing an IPv6 project for Mongolia as well.
Wow, great. Which side you're joining from Mongolia?
Which side? What I don't understand the question.
I mean, just clarifying that what organization joining from Mongolia?
Oh, so ErdumNet.
Ah, okay, I know that. This is one of the major network for education backgrounds. Yeah, good to know.
So we're hoping to get some people, hopefully from Australia and Europe, that will come to that event and give their advice and guidance on how NRENs develop services, how they cost them, and the different paths they take, and introduce those services to the rest of the networking community in Mongolia, because it's not the case that just because we are NRENs doesn't mean we're anti-commercial organizations. Same with Identity Federation, because we promote some things, it doesn't mean that we do that to the neglect of the commercial service sector. And actually, we need that wider community to be able to engage the number of people that we want.
Yeah, good to know. I was just wondering also maybe some remote installation, if time available for the TERI. I was just wondering the kind of things, because we can provide some virtual servers, some other things like that. Yeah, sorry about the long time no communications. I was reading emails, exchanging some information, but it's mostly missed the Slack channels, I guess. But thanks for contacting by emails, sharing information. Right?
You're still at the Mongolian Libraries Association?
Yeah. We're doing some other things like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we might have to work on journal access. Well, I'm hoping to be in Mongolia at the end of October. So I'll make sure I've got enough time to come visit. If you're not already in NOG, yeah.
Yeah, generally we are very open for the travelers, no restriction. But depending on which country you are staying here, and also flight ticket was still expensive somehow.
Yeah, the flights are limited, so I think I have to go via Seoul and take your local airline from Seoul to Ulaanbaatar.
Yes, it's major airlines or between Seoul and Mongolia. They have many routing.
Yeah.
Between many flights between Seoul and Mongolia. Then they have also some other flights through the Turkey. I mean, the Istanbul.
Yes, yes. So that's why we can get some European people, because they can actually make that journey, right? So it's actually not that difficult to come from Europe. It's not particularly easy to come from where I am in Australia, but you know.
Yeah, I know many of my friends, they're going to Australia during the summertime for some other international things. I think there are a lot of flights between Australia and Mongolia through Korea.
Yeah, I think we've got a lot of agricultural workers. There's a new program for to make it easier for Mongolian agricultural workers to come to Australia. So I guess on the back of that, there's more flights and there's more interest in coming to Australia.
Oh, yeah, good. Okay, good to know each other. Thanks for updating. And see you tomorrow, Nelson, some other seminars.
Yeah.
So Toby's just joined us.
Oh. Nice to see you, Terry, again.
Yep, nice to see you.
Yeah.
Hi, Terry. Sorry, I'm quite busy in our office.
You missed everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He also knows everything, so
yeah, he's all over the Federation stuff.
I will check also again my Slack channel again. Okay.
Yeah.
But if anything's related questions or some other clarification related Mongolia, please let me know. Okay.
So is Mongolia part of APAN?
Part of Asia Connect, yes. Part of APAN, no. So not a member of APAN Association, but a member of the Asia Connect consortium.
So potentially we could have someone from Mongolia participate in iFIRExMAN.
Yeah.
If they knew early enough and there was a willingness to do it.
Yeah.
Definitely, they have a lot of issues related membership cost. That's why we have some difficulty joining for the member of some institution.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but we sort of had a misstep in not getting a Mongolian to to Singapore. But maybe we can support that work in the interim.
Wow, but you are doing long term, doing for this project.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. I think you have some other programs on tomorrow, right?
Not me. I'm done for